So I'm Daniel Lathrop. I work at the Dallas Morning News for another couple of months. After that, I'm going to be teaching at the University of Iowa Journalism School, where my hope is to put out a new generation of reporters who can program and do math. Because one of the biggest problems that we have, if you read any mainstream news site, consume any mainstream media, is that journalists are largely innumerate. And I think, personally, it's been my mission to change that, which is why I'm ditching the better-paying world of print journalism, which is not a well-paying world, for the even less well-paid world of academia. But academia has its own benefits, like I can work on what I want. And if I do a really good job for the next 6 years, I may get tenure, and that would be pretty cool. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing at the Dallas Morning News to try to both make our journalism more numerate using Python and to make our reporters more numerate.
They just let out over there.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll wait for a moment then.
It's okay. I was just letting you know that.
Oh, okay. I guess we'll wait just a minute and see if we get any other customers. In the meantime, does anybody? I'm just curious why people are here. If you're here just because you were in this room before and you just didn't want to move, hands. Okay. You're interested in journalism. Okay. You're curious about what the heck a journalist would do with Python. Yeah. Okay. Those are good reasons to be here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, to start with, about a class that we did. The Dallas Morning News newsroom has 300 people, which is one of the largest newsrooms in the country. There are a handful, the New York Times, the LA Times, that have larger newsrooms. And there's no, other than national news organizations like the New York Times and the LA Times, the Associated Press, Reuters, etc. There really aren't any news organizations out there that I know of that have newsrooms much bigger than us, at a scale. Now, in the world before Craigslist and before the internet, the Dallas Morning News had 800-person newsroom because we had a monopoly on a large chunk of local advertising, and we charged a lot of money for it. And our customers didn't love that, but they needed to reach our readers, and so they gave us a lot of money. That has not been true. The print newspaper industry has seen declines in advertising revenue year over year, every quarter for basically the past decade, without a single quarter of improvement for at least since 2003. So anyhow, that's all a way of saying we still have more journalists than anybody else, but we also have fewer people than we used to, and not being laid off is the new raise in journalism. So I was really pleased when we sent out a note, not a very encouraging note actually, to our newsroom that said basically, we're going to do a class on programming in Python. We'll teach you how to scrape a website and the basics of a programming language. And it didn't really say much more than that. And I had told my boss when I planned to send this email that 6 people would sign up, and I knew who they were. And instead, 60 people signed up. And it included feature writers, it included copy editors, it included graphic artists, designers, pretty much assignment editors, the people who are bosses of reporters. A lot of people who I never would have guessed would be interested. And the reason for that was that journalism is in a tremendous period of transition, and everybody gets, finally, that, and it's taken a long time for people to get their heads there, that they can't keep doing things the same old way. And this seemed like maybe an approach that we could take. So we have these slides that we put up. And if anybody's interested, they're at datalab.dallasnews.com. I'm not going to go through these, obviously. It's pretty basic. And we spent 6 weeks, and we had a dropout rate of 66 and 2/3%, which was better than when we found out 60 people were signing up. Was a lower dropout rate than I thought it would be, because I still thought only 6 people were going to get through the class, and I knew who they were. Those 6 people did all make it through the class. I'm very pleased. My plan to teach them Python worked. But along the way, what I discovered was that Python is actually a great way to teach people who are not really quantitative thinkers about quantitative thinking. And that was a great discovery for me, because I've been trying for a decade to teach reporters who are not geeky like me how to think quantitatively. And this, in teaching them Python and teaching them a little bit about programming and teaching them just enough to scrape some basic websites, I saw the lights go off in people's eyes, and I've seen the difference in their journalism already. And I think there's a lesson in that for other organizations that have a lot of people in them who really should be thinking more quantitatively, more analytically, that actually Python in particular, because it is very rigid, you have to do things exactly the right way, and there really is one right way to do it, got people thinking in a different headspace and in a different way, and they didn't have to be people who wanted to be developers, who wanted to be programmers, who wanted to be analysts. They really worked with writers. Writers are about as far as you can get from computer scientists in terms of personality type, particularly newspaper reporters who tend to be, or reporter writers who tend to be outgoing. They spend their life talking to people, although they are smart, so they're not totally the opposite. You have to be smart to be a reporter. Well, you have to be smart to be a good reporter. Anybody can be a bad reporter. I can teach you to be a bad reporter in an afternoon. So that's sort of one piece of what we've been doing, and I'm really pleased. I'm just sort of sharing with people about it. We started off with a very basic plan, which was that we were going to teach people to scrape one website, and in 6 weeks we were able to take people from nothing in Python to scraping a website and getting the salary information of every player in the NFL. We started with the Dallas Cowboys in like week 3 and worked our way up till we actually were exporting it to a reasonably useful CSV file. I am waiting to see somebody do something with that, but none of our sports writers were in the class, so it's my expectation that probably won't happen. But it also paid dividends, and this is a lesson I think for any organization that is not primarily a technical organization that is great. One of the writers at the paper, he covers the city of Irving. Folks here who are from the DFW area? Yeah, okay. So the city of Irving has this crazy mayor who's decided that the big issue facing the city of Irving, which is an inner-ring suburb facing the challenges that inner-ring suburbs face, like changing demographics, like infrastructure that is now reaching an age where maintenance costs are suddenly going way up from where they had been because it was all new. Sharia law. Naturally, that's the big issue facing Irving, according to the mayor. And she's nuts. And one of our reporters has been covering this nutty mayor. And he does not say she's nuts. He's very objective about the whole thing. I don't cover them. I think she's nuts. And so he decided he was going to monitor her Facebook page, see what she was doing on her Facebook page, and see particularly if she was deleting things she'd said and deleting comments. Now, traditionally, the way a newspaper reporter would do this is they would go to the person's webpage every day and look through it and see if they saw anything different. He had been in our class, and so he thought, there's a better way. I'm going to write a scraper. And he taught himself how to, using some libraries that other people had already built, how to go in and pull down everything from her page using Facebook API and diff it and see what was new and what had been added and what had gone away. And he said, in the end, he did not find a great story out of that, but he did now have a way to monitor what was going on with her or any other Facebook page of somebody that he covered. And that's the kind of transformation that I think can apply to any organization. It can apply to a bank. It can apply to, I don't know, I always think of banks as being not like what we do. It can apply to, a restaurant supply company. It can apply to anybody, because now I have a bunch of people in my newsroom, 20 who finished the class, 60 who got part of the way through it, who know just enough to do really simple things themselves without asking me, which means that I and my team and other technical teams at the paper can now spend more time working on harder things, more interesting things. And the other thing is they now see the possibilities, and they now understand a lot more about what can be done. And we're getting lots of people who were in the class and who weren't in the class saying, oh, we'd really like to do this. We would really like to scrape and monitor the Dallas County Civil Courts to see when these kinds of things happen. And the best thing about that was we were able to get that request from somebody who wasn't in the class but had heard about the class and heard about what people were doing. And then we were able to get someone who was in the class to volunteer to write the scraper, which means that not only did we create awareness in the organization of the kinds of things that we can do, did we get people thinking quantitatively and analytically instead of like, well, I'll just go through the civil courts and see if there's anything interesting, which is the typical journalistic way to approach monitoring a civil court docket. Just look at it. I recognize that name. That might be interesting. And then we also had somebody non-technical, not primarily technical, to outsource the work to, which again means that my team gets the benefit of increasing our mission within the newsroom and at the same time still getting to spend most of our time on more interesting problems. I guess I should also show you, I would say within journalism, that's my inspirational story. I hope you liked it. I hope you can take it back if you do work in a non-technical organization to that. This is our GitHub repository. We have most of this is either front-end stuff in JavaScript or back-end stuff in Python or scripts that we've built in Python. Within journalism, I would say most people who do what I do, data journalism, work primarily or at least partially in Python. There's obvious reasons for that. Python is the best general-purpose language that spans two dimensions that those of us who do what I do in journalism usually spend a lot of time in. One is web development, either for the public or particularly with me, internal tools, tools for myself even, and then more importantly, analysis. The ability to do high-level analysis in a language that also has that general purpose is, I think, really transformative. It's why we wanted to teach Python to people in our news organization, because as opposed to if they were to go learn R to do more statistical work, or SPSS, or SAS, or any statistical programming package or language. You get that in Python, and for free, you get a general purpose language that can do any number of things, that can scrape a website, that you can use to build something in Django or Flask. And so you see a lot of this, amounts to just building tools. This is something I made recently. It's a Django thing to let people upload a data set and then use it and then edit it in the Django admin. So was not an incredibly complicated project. It's a huge benefit for me in my newsroom because now I can take any reporter who has a data project, and instead of saying, okay, here's an Excel spreadsheet, start entering stuff into it. Whatever you do, don't enter text into these fields that I want to be numbers. I have data validation. A date is always a date. A string is always a string. We can do geo fields, and it's not just random address that we hope will geocode. They get the map. They can go up and drop the point. They can enter the address and see the point that's getting plotted and fix it if it's wrong, which has been already a really good thing, and I'm hoping will translate into more interesting, more quantitative, more interactive products from the Dallas Morning News in the next year or 2 years. Let's see. All right, that's 20 minutes. So I'm going to take questions in just a few minutes. Before that, I would like to show off, talk a little bit about journalism's relationship with Python just a little bit longer. I think if you follow tech and journalism, there's a site called Source, and it's run by a program called Open News, which was started by Mozilla and by the Knight Foundation, which is the biggest nonprofit funder of journalism stuff. Knight Foundation was started by the Knight brothers, who owned the Miami Herald. They became very rich, and they didn't like their kids, so they left all the money to a foundation. And they are probably the only organization funding serious R&D in journalism other than the New York Times, which has a large R&D department. But like a lot of R&D departments at non-technical organizations, their R&D department doesn't seem to produce a lot of things that actually make their way into the product. But they make lots of cool stuff. If you follow Source religiously, as I and the 100, 200 other people who do what I do within journalism do, you'll see that almost everything that's going on there is being done in Python, except for the stuff that's being done that's front-end related. And obviously, until we have Python in the browser, Brython project, big plug for them. Hopefully, someday we will all be able to abandon JavaScript. And that ranges from the New York Times to small newspapers. Django web framework itself was actually built at a small newspaper originally. And so...
Which one was that?
The Lawrence, Nebraska World. They decided they built the very, it was, when they released it, it was Django 0.5, I think. I used it back then. It was already awesome because it had the admin, and that was so saved my life so many times. So let's from there, let's do questions. Huh? Oh, yeah, sure. So let's see. Source, open news. There we go. Yeah, see, that's what I get for Yahoo. I apologize. Other questions while I try to find this website that I usually go to? I'm not, let's see.
How did you become a data editor?
How did I become a data editor? That is an excellent question. I started off as, I'm sorry, this is just, So I started off as a police and courts reporter at a small town newspaper in Iowa, which is how once upon a time was the traditional starting point for a journalist. You sort of worked at a small newspaper and then a slightly bigger newspaper and then a slightly bigger newspaper. And someday, if you made it through that winnowing process, you ended up at a really big newspaper like the Dallas Morning News. This is the convention. Open News. OpenNews.org, of course. And from the source. Just a sec. I'm just going to do from the Open News. All right. All right. Anyhow, this is a lot of the interesting stuff. Open News is, yeah, the blog's the blog here. This is the thing. So, and a lot of this stuff lately is about the big SourceCon convention because that's coming up. All the deadlines are. Yes?
So, as your organization becomes a little more tech savvy,
a little tech savvy. Let's not even, we don't even need to say a little more tech savvy.
Do the leadership who makes decisions about how the business is going to continue to produce value and how it's going to survive in the changing world, do they see new opportunities with doing things with data, doing things with maybe providing APIs, repackaging data?
So the answer is yes. The Dallas Morning News, which is the oldest business in Texas, oldest continuously operated business in Texas, founded during the Republic of Texas, not this newfangled United States of America, recently hired a new editor-in-chief. He's the first editor-in-chief hired from outside the staff of the paper in 35 years. He is a man named Mike Wilson. His most recent job before this was as the managing editor of 538.com, which is, Nate Silver's site. So let's see, 538 with the little fox. Which is all about data analysis, data visualization. So that's the direction our publisher clearly is going. It's the reason I've been there for 6 years. It's the reason I have a team of people. We actually are already creating products that are profitable, that have added to the bottom line. The most boring but profitable of which is this best neighborhoods. Wow. There we go. All right. Which is our neighborhood comparison site. This allows you to based on a variety of data points or not, Wow. Flip to that. Anyhow, it lets you, we have sliders. You can come up with a list based on data we collected about neighborhoods. We've been doing this project for 3 years now. It has made the company in the aggregate over that time well over $500,000, which since that's far in excess of the cost of my team over that time, puts us as a profit center, just alone as a profit center. We're about to launch a new version that will hopefully not have whatever problem it is that's causing it not to load today, on May 15th. And it's what we've done is we've collected quantitative data about everything from crime to the percentage of people who own pets. And then we used fairly basic statistical analysis to create ranges and z-scores for each of those things. We index them up into a set of 11 indexes, and then we weight in terms of what we produce as sort of for the top line here are the top 10 places to live. We did a poll, like a real survey poll, of Amber Alert. Sorry, of the DFW area for what people care about in a place to live. It was a stacked preference, and so we were able to do percent of preference, and then the sliders lets people do that for themselves. So that's I guess that's a very long way of saying that's an example of the kind of products we're trying to create and we're trying to build. Is that has the additional benefit of being in a very sweet spot for us, which is that it fulfills a serious reader need, has great reader interest, and also is really attractive to advertisers. The print section that we're doing on it recently closed, and we sold more advertising in it than we had budgeted for, which doesn't sound that impressive, except I work in an industry where the amount of advertising has declined year over year for the better part of a decade. Other questions? Yeah?
So that type of project requires public data sources, I suppose. How many of those are from government, municipal, and how many of them do you have to build yourself and curate?
Well, for that project, there are a number of the data sets that are mosaics. Like the first several years, our crime data was a mosaic. I went and collected it from half a dozen different sources, that stored it in well, no, it was more than half a dozen sources. It was about a dozen sources, and that was only because thankfully, the North Central Texas Council of Governments was already gathering crime data from a lot of municipal and county police agencies, but unfortunately, those were then themselves already stored in a variety of different. There was one data format, but the actual semantic content of the data, what things that were in them meant, was still different from small town to small town. We gathered. I'll say this: we didn't create any of our own. We created a bunch of our own data sets for it, which are searchable in terms of at the neighborhood level through this tool, and will be more so in the one that we're about to release. We've talked about putting it out there as an API. The biggest barrier to which is that some of what's in there is proprietary data that people provided to us for free because they thought it was a valuable service for the public, but exposing their data as part of that without charge would mess with their business model, and I didn't really sign any licensing agreements on it, so technically speaking, there's no reason that we couldn't, but it would be really low rent. But most of it is either primarily from government or secondarily from government. So it's, for example, ESRI, the big GIS company, has provided us a fair amount of data that is their own or that they've purchased projections based on census data so that we could, census and then other public data so that you can do projections on things like what areas are likely to be experiencing high growth in property values, which is, of course, something that is of great interest to people. Yeah?
So what do you think are the biggest blockers for more data-driven journalism? Is it the fact that your fellow journalists are illiterate, or the fact that putting these data sets together requires a lot of manual labor, or just going and digging up records?
I think the biggest barrier to it is that most news organizations haven't figured out what the role of it is in their business. You have this sort of crop of news startups like 538 and Vox that are putting sort of data, the upshot at the New York Times, data and data analysis at the center of their news product. It's a core part of what they do. For a legacy news organization like the Dallas Morning News, traditionally our value add to our customers has been, we'll tell you what's happening at your local city council meeting. We'll tell you whether the Cowboys won or lost. We'll tell you a lot of those kinds of things. And to the extent that we do really big analytical stuff, it translates into really big, the sort of, so my job is, my position, my team are part of the investigative projects team, because that was the place in the organization that kind of could figure out what to do with us. Like, oh, you work on things for a long time and they're really cool. You must be an investigative projects reporter. And a lot of my work actually does involve that, does involve investigative work, which is where a lot of the data journalism at most news organizations is hiding. It's hiding in those big investigative packages. The truth is that that's the biggest barrier, is that news organizations really haven't yet figured out how to reinvent themselves to provide people a different kind of information than they have in the past, which is really funny because news organizations have reinvented themselves over and over again in just the 20th century, and sort of basic data journalism has been is a point that I like to make to other journalists, has been one of the core things for a lot of news organizations. The New York Times bestseller list. What is that? Just they collect data from booksellers and tabulate it to find out what books are selling the most. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, started by the Wall Street Journal, recently sold, I believe, to Morningstar for more money than News Corporation is worth. Or the Wall Street Journal was worth once it was sold, let me say that. Let's see, in sports, you know, those #1 schools, they're the #1 team in basketball and football. The number that is generally being cited there is either a coach's poll or a sports writer's poll done by the Associated Press, which is data journalism. But we haven't, I would say we haven't figured out enough things like our best neighborhoods where we can build local franchises around it.
Well, it's a mixed bag, right? You don't need data journalism to say what happened at City Hall last night, right?
You don't, but you do need data journalism. You do need data journalism to help you determine whether that matters. And I will say, within sort of investigative and enterprise journalism, journalists do a very good job, by and large, of either being able to work with data on their own. Most news organizations have people like me who will work with them on on making sure that people can do, get a spreadsheet of the road of the street conditions, and we'll tell, and we can, it's easy to figure out, which areas have, have the worst streets, and easy to figure out things like, oh, look, the streets next to members of the city council are always great. I think we do a better job of that also than we really surface to our readers. Yeah.
Were you able, I'm not exactly sure how to frame this question. Pegasus News used to use a lot of Python.
Yep.
Were you able to synergize within organizationally? Was there, you're a reporter, is there a story here? And how was...
Yeah. So I will say this. Pegasus was acquired by the Dallas Morning News a few years ago. We acquired them mostly for their listings, their tool for gathering and surfacing event listings. Some of the people that we brought over from Pegasus are at the core of this, which is the relaunch of the Dallas Morning News's essentially arts and entertainment coverage, arts and entertainment dining, and you can see a lot of the content that is now coming out of this is directly out of that Pegasus database. 20 things to do this weekend, 5. On the news side, the answer is no. On the news side, we never really.
I didn't use it for news anyway.
Huh?
I used it for this stuff, so it's all good.
Yeah, I mean this is the other thing that is true is that Mike Oren, who started Pegasus News, is now running one of the most promising parts of our business, which is a content marketing operation that he has put together that helps businesses be on the internet. And so I will say to a certain extent, Pegasus News is saving the business of the Dallas Morning News because the real reason we bought Pegasus was to acqui-hire Mike. Lunch break? Any other?
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Yep.